afternoon. We are excited you have joined us for our webinar exploring teaching pathways and success strategies for PARCC assessments. My name is Jeremy Brunton. I am the sales manager for Lumos Learning, and I will be serving as your facilitator for our time together today. It is my pleasure to introduce our two presenters and authors, Mrs. Julie Lyons and Mrs. Marissa Adams. Julie is a public school teacher with over 15 years experience in New Jersey and Pennsylvania as a teacher and instructional coach at the elementary and middle school levels. Marissa has over 15 years experience in public education working as a teacher and administrator at the elementary, junior high, and high school levels.
Thank you, Jeremy. And we would like to thank each one of you for joining us today as we explore the teaching pathways to survive the new PARCC assessments. We'll take a look at a quick introduction to PARCC, explore the different parts of PARCC, then we'll look specifically at the components of PARCC for English language arts and math before looking at 5 key survival tips. As Jeremy mentioned, we will close with time for questions and answers. So let's go ahead and start.
Okay, on the screen, you'll see an infographic which gives an overview of the PARCC assessment system. PARCC recognizes that the best way to measure student academic success is to assess them multiple times a year. To that end, they've created a system that relies on multiple assessments, 2 of which are required, the performance-based assessment, or the PBA, and the end-of-year assessment, the EOI. The PBA is the first test students take once 75% of the year is complete, and that's probably the one that most of you would be familiar with. Then, once 90% of the school year is finished, the EOI is given. In the center of the infographic, you will see the different question types students will be assessed with. We'll go into these in detail later, but at a high level, math includes Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 questions. English language arts literacy includes evidence-based, technology-enhanced, and prose-constructed responses. All questions are deeply aligned to the Common Core state standards.
Let's look a little closer at the first required component, the performance-based assessment. The PBA is broken into 2 sections and sessions, English language arts and math. The ELA session has 3 units, a literary analysis task, a research simulation task, and a narrative writing task. The math session is broken into 2 units with a portion of Unit 1 dedicated to time with a calculator and without a calculator.
With all these new types of questions on a new technological format, how much time students have to complete the test is often the concern. These are the times given by PARCC for the English Language Arts PBA. PARCC is given 2 sets of time for each unit, time given and the estimated time. The time given in the first column at each grade level is the amount of time that all students must be given to complete a unit. They do not have to take this much time, but it must be offered if needed. The estimated time, however, is the amount of time that PARCC estimates the students will spend on each unit.
Similarly, PARCC also gives 2 different times for the math PBA as well, the time given and the estimated times. By this point in the year, as Julie mentioned a minute ago, most of your students have either taken the PARCC assessment, the first one, the performance-based assessment, which is called the PBA, or they will be taking it very soon. The next step in the PARCC process is the EOI, or the end-of-year exam. Since you've seen the PARCC and had a little bit more familiarity with it, we thought we'd look at what should you expect in the EOI. What is similar, and how is it different from the test your students just took?
On a global level, the EOI is a 2-session test, also focusing on English language arts, literacy, and math. Each session is broken down into 2 units, with a few exceptions. Like the PBA, Math Unit 1 has 2 sections, one for calculator usage and one for non-calculator usage.
As they did with the PBA, PARCC has given times for the EOI as well. These times might be slightly different than what you have seen published in the past. Based on feedback from pilot testing and testing groups in the fall of 2014, PARCC found students took considerably less time than anticipated to complete the test. Additionally, based on an evaluation of the assessment, PARCC reduced the proposed number of English language arts text passages and questions that students in lower grades would face.
Similar to the ELA, PARCC has updated their estimated time that students will spend on the tasks. Depending on the grade level, it may be anywhere from 75 to 80 minutes. Remember, in math, there are 2 tasks, and a portion of the first will have time with the calculator and then without.
So now that we have an overview of PARCC, let's delve a little deeper and explore how English language arts looks through the lens of PARCC. The PARCC assessments reflect the Common Core state standards. So one of the best ways to prepare your students is to ensure that your daily instruction aligns with the core. With that said, there are 3 key shifts that may differ from how English language arts standards were taught previously and also assessed.
The first key shift for the core is regular practice with increasingly complex texts throughout the course of the school year. This will help students tackle challenging reading material. Of course, simply having students read difficult text without scaffolding or instruction will not help your students be successful. Instead, it's necessary to instruct and assist students in ways that will help them increase their comprehension and their confidence. And although students vary greatly in their independent reading levels and abilities, there are a few simple ways to get started in helping students be more comfortable with complex texts.
First is with close reading. During close reading, students will need to revisit and reread the text several times to glean important information. It's designed to help students not only read and comprehend text, but interact with it deeply.
The second is something that many of us do as teachers is read alouds, which model your thinking as a teacher and help them learn to deconstruct the text and make meaning from the text they are reading.
And along with that, next goes independent reading. While supported reading through read alouds is essential, independent reading cannot be neglected. The more often students read and read text that's at their independent reading level and come into contact with text, the stronger, more confident readers they will become.
And then a final strategy to help them is with think alouds. Similar to read alouds, by giving the children a glimpse into your own thought processes, you can provide them with a model for how to approach challenging text.
The second shift in ELA is when the Common Core emphasizes students' ability to use text-based evidence to support their claims. This leads to that second shift, students reading, writing, and speaking using evidence from texts. This does not mean students do not make personal connections to the text they are reading. It simply requires they make those connections and then deepen them with cited evidence. So how do we get our students to begin deepening that connection?
Well, first, we can begin by helping students understand how to go back into the text and cite the evidence. This goes beyond looking for specific keywords or phrases, but it includes modeling for them and helping them to understand how they can use evidence from the text to defend their answers and defend their arguments.
And along with that idea is a Socratic seminar, because it's an excellent tool to help your students get more comfortable with citing textual evidence, as well as strengthening speaking and listening skills.
And Socratic seminars are another instructional strategy you can use as one component of helping students have more evidence-based discussions, which in turn can increase their ability to regularly ground their reading, writing, and speaking with in-text evidence.
And then the final English language arts shift under the Common Core and PARCC is regular practice with content-rich nonfiction to build knowledge. This can be accomplished in several ways. First, informational content can be infused and embedded throughout all content areas, leaving time in English language arts to focus on fiction and increasing necessary student knowledge in other areas such as social studies and science. Additionally, when deep alignment occurs both horizontally within the grade level and vertically within content areas, students can be exposed to appropriate content-rich informational text that's high quality.
Focusing on the 3 different key shifts, PARCC will assess student knowledge within 3 different types of tasks: literary analysis, research simulation, and narrative writing. For the EOY, there will be no writing component. Throughout each unit of the ELA assessment, students will be exposed to new types of questions. The first, and probably most familiar, is the evidence-based selected response, or EBSR. These questions are the most similar to standard multiple choice questions that students are used to seeing. The second type of question, and the most new, is the Technology Enhanced Constructed Response, or the TECR. These questions will require students to manipulate technology in some way. For example, they may be asked to drag and drop their answers or selectively highlight their answers in the text. No matter what they're asked to do, they will be manipulating technology to construct and justify answers.
And the third type of question is the Prose Constructed Response, or PCR. These questions, which are found in the PBA, will require students to type their response into a box on the screen. Because most schools have already completed the PBA, in our samples in a moment, we're going to focus more on the question types that will be seen on the EOY. The most important thing to remember with the PARCC questions is that while there may be different types, they will all be in more depth than what your students may used to be seeing. In this graphic, taken from the PARCC site, you will see a side-by-side comparison of the older way questions might be asked compared to PARCC's new way. This is the standard vocabulary question we might all be familiar with, where students simply had to know the meaning of the word and find the synonym. In the new question style, students will have to refer to the text, find the meaning of the word in Part A, and then prove and justify their answer in Part B.
Now let's take a look a little bit more in depth at the types of questions your students will see on the PARCC EOY and how those questions will look. As you can see, the format of the PARCC ELA exams are significantly different from what students might be used to in the past. First, the stories are formatted for electronic usage. So you'll see on the left side of the screen, students are going to see 1, 2, or even 3 passages, but they will not see the passages in their entirety unless they scroll down. Once they've read their passage, they will be able to begin answering the questions associated with it. Thinking of the types of questions we just reviewed, let's look at Part A. This is considered an evidence-based question, or an EBSR. Students must read the word as it is used in the context of paragraph 1, pulling that evidence to answer the question. Once they make their selection, they then scroll down to Part B, which requires even more evidence.
Reading the question, students will see the need to return to the story to prove their answer. With evidence-based questions, PARCC is ensuring students can not only answer the question being asked, but can find the evidence to defend their selection. This becomes very helpful when answering critical thinking questions or questions where more than one answer might initially make sense to the student.
The next question we'll look at is a technology-enhanced question. Again, the reading passage is on the left. You'll notice this passage is the same from the previous set of questions. Similar to the other testing formats, students will answer more than one question about each reading passage. In this case, the students can tell that this is not a standard multiple choice evidence-based question from the instructions before the question. They are told to drag the words into the charts. This question has multiple steps. Drag one word, then another word, and then drag and drop evidence for those words.
You can see as the students manipulate the answer choices and then drag them into the boxes below, the boxes turn yellow. Then removing that choice from the list once they place it in the box. If the student realizes that they made a mistake, they simply click on the black X to remove it. The answer they selected will return to the list and turn blue again, leaving the box white so they can then drag in another choice.
Another type of evidence-based selected response questions again has students relying on evidence to prove their answers in Part A. However, this time, students will be selecting 2 sentences from the options below. And in this case, students will notice a difference in how that happens. In Part A, a more traditional style multiple choice question, they see a radial dial that they're familiar with. But when they move to Part B, they will notice boxes instead of circles. When they make their selection, a small check mark appears. A good trick that students can remember is anytime they see those small boxes rather than the circles next to the letters, they will have more than one answer.
And in a final sample of the technology-enhanced questions, you can see that again, students will have their reading passage on the left side of the screen. In this case, they are reading an informational passage that includes a map as a visual. Once they are finished, they are asked to drag and drop their events into the chart below to show cause, effect, and response. As students select a choice from above, all available boxes turn blue until they drop the response in.
So along with knowing and understanding different types of questions, it's also critical to know the common language of both the Common Core and the PARCC. Though many of the words that are listed on your screen are more than ones that both you and your students recognize, simply knowing them is not enough. Students must know common working definitions, as the PARCC and Common Core use them, and be able to apply them when necessary.
Now let's shift gears to the mathematics portion of the PARCC. As we've already discussed, the PARCC test reflects the Common Core. So as you align your instruction to the standards, you are already preparing your students for success. And similarly to the English Language Arts portion, the new standards and assessment has shifted in 3 key ways.
First, the math now emphasizes a greater focus but on fewer topics. The standards have been created to focus on fewer topics which delve deeper into each topic. This allows the students a better opportunity to have a much more comprehensive grasp of the material.
Exploring these concepts in a deeper way allows students the ability to deeply understand the content, creating an enduring knowledge and not simply knowledge to master an assessment and then forget later. Mathematical concepts have been identified to focus and are built upon from year to the next.
The next shift reflects the importance of understanding the interplay, connectedness, and relationships between various mathematical concepts by building new understanding onto the foundation that had been built previously.
This is done by helping students understand the connection between concepts. We know that good learning should not occur in isolation, but instead is built and scaffolded upon previous learning. As students understand this interconnectedness, their understanding of the mathematical concept deepens as well.
And the final shift is increased rigor through conceptual learning. Concepts, procedures, skills, fluency, and application must all be stressed and used regularly to understand the concepts deeply and fully.
In other words, students need to understand mathematical concepts deeply and fully, and they need to develop automaticity with basic facts, along with speed and accuracy, and they need to correctly apply that knowledge to their own conceptual understanding.
Similar to the ELA assessment, the math portion of the assessment also has new kinds of questions. Math questions are broken into types. The first, type 1, assesses concepts, skills, and procedures. These questions will cover all standards and mathematical practices, so all content can be viewed through these questions. Students should be fluent in conceptual understanding and math skills. In other words, they need to be able to view a problem, understand what it's asking, and apply their math skills to solve it. Type 2 and Type 3 questions are similar to the PCR from the ELA portion because these two question types will not be assessed on the EOY exam at the end of the year.
The Math EOY exam also has a variety of ways to ask the Type 1 questions. Students may need to select an operation or an answer from a drop-down menu. They may enter their text into a box, use traditional multiple choice answers, manipulate a grid by highlighting or selecting points, or they may need to use the equation editor. So let's take a moment to look through some of these different types of questions and how they differ from the old way of asking.
In this side-by-side comparison, you can see that in the past, students may be asked simple questions, such as writing a fraction or drawing a simple number line. Now, in assessing that same skill, students will be asked to manipulate a number line, explain how they know their answers are correct, answer another question, and then explain that as well. The PARCC-style questions are much more in-depth than students might have been used to in the past.
The first sample involves a technology-enhanced question where students must write their answer into the question box. One thing to pay close attention to on the math sessions is the label. In this case, the label is already in place, so students only need to fill in the mathematical portion of their answer.
In this next question, students will need to find the correct coordinates on the grid and then graph the points. If the student pays close attention to the directions, they'll note that the reminder to make sure that all 3 grid points are marked. The colors will match those of the labels, so when they're finished, they should have a blue, pink, and gray dot.
This next sample question, students will recognize a similar design to what they saw on the English Language Arts portion, the multiple select response. Because there are check marks and boxes, students automatically know they will have more than one correct answer. In this case, the directions let them know that there are 2 statements they will be marking.
Now for this question, students must be familiar with the equation editor. Although the editor has many functions and more are added as the grade levels increase, in this case, they're only entering the fraction, so they need to always be sure to read the entire question carefully.
And finally, on this last question, you will notice that the key information is at the top of the page. This becomes extremely important for students because with these new questions, they may often have to refer back to the top to double-check the original information posted. Once they do that, then students will write their answers for Part A and Part B in the boxes.
Also similar to language arts, students must be familiar with the language and the meaning of the common terms to ensure that they are to be successful.
Now looking at that idea of success. Now that we have a deeper understanding of an overview of PARCC and the specific sessions, English, Language Arts, and Math, let's summarize it a little and see the key tips to be successful.
So some of the key ways that we mentioned to survive the PARCC test include knowing that lingo, knowing the test itself and the format, the questions, etc., preparing your students so that they feel confident and competent when they walk in on the test day, regular practice, and then finally and most importantly, teach, teach, always teach.
Because the information relating to PARCC is so vast, we know much of what has been covered this afternoon only scratches the surface. All of the information that we've discussed, plus much more, can be found in the new PARCC guidebook, Success Strategies for Teachers. So we'd love to encourage you to pick up a copy and read the book, and more importantly, join us for our conversation on Twitter using the hashtag PARCCGuide. Both Julie and I are very active on Twitter. Our Twitter usernames are on the screen. And we'd love to not only answer questions, but more than that, build a community and generate deep discussion as we all move through this new PARCC assessment process together. If you want any more specific information, you can reach Jeremy, who is our facilitator this afternoon, and he can help get you in contact with Julie or I, and we'll be glad to answer any other questions that you might have.